Hi, and welcome to the When Women Fly podcast. Each episode, I have poignant conversations with women who fly, run, surf, ski, climb, or otherwise soar, and possess a passion for life that is infectious. These are honest and insightful conversations about dreams and reinvention, often in the face of uncertainty, doubt, or other impediments. We talk about busting paradigms, grit, working hard, and playing hard, all while building a community around the empowering metaphor of flight. I am your host, Sylvia Winter, a pilot, runner, mother, skier, list maker, and apparently podcaster. I believe that when we share our stories, own our fears, and dismantle our perceived limitations, the possibilities are boundless. Whether you're pursuing your passion or simply love the idea of possibility and wonder, this podcast is for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let's get started. My guest this week is Bethany Miller, Dr. Bethany Miller. She's an aviator, a businesswoman, a writer, and a world traveler. This is a particularly validating conversation for any of us out there with nonlinear lives who fly in the face of tradition and deviate from a prescribed sequence in their life's journey. She digs deep into the psychology and constitution of those who pattern lives around intuition, adaptability, and a sort of comfort with chaos. Bethany is a pilot. She spent 20 years in the Air Force, flying missions around the world, and has flown for the major airlines. She has earned an MBA and a doctoral degree with a research focus on career psychology. In our conversation, we dig deep into what it means to be a flux agent and understand the mindset behind nonlinear career paths. If you have ever wanted to create a life you love, Bethany's first book, The Flux Agent's Guidebook, How to Identify and Advance Your Life's Work, is a must-read. She's passionate about the science and art of futurism. I think you are going to get an immense amount out of this conversation. So put on your growth mindset and let's delve into nonlinear career paths and what it takes to be a flux agent with Dr. Bethany Miller. There's so many facets of your life, Bethany, that we will touch on today, but what was your childhood like?
I had a great childhood. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and mom and dad and a little sister. We were encouraged to do everything. We had to take one art, one dance, science classes, one sport, Girl Scouts, cooking, lots of things. My parents said that they didn't know what we would be when we grew up, so they wanted us to try everything. And we had to stick it out if we signed up for something. You had to do the whole season. But after that, you didn't have to return to it. There was no pressure to be a great athlete. You just had to try something athletic. I think my sister and I chose one each of everything at some point and got a little taste for what was out there and really exposed us to just a world of opportunities. We knew we could be anything.
And did you think of flying when you were young, or when did that come into your frame of possibility?
I get that question a lot, and I don't have a great answer to it. It just kind of came into my life slowly, and I was always interested in adventure and travel and science. I liked the aerodynamics of thinking a big machine could go into the air. That was kind of magical to me. Never really did anything really mechanical in particular, but I liked aviation. And then I kind of fell in with that crowd and did Civil Air Patrol. I did ROTC in college
Hmm.
and joined the Air Force through ROTC. So I was commissioned when I graduated and
Hmm.
was one of the few people in the early 90s to have a job when I graduated. So that was great.
Tell us about the ROTC program and how that fit into your college experience.
I was actually on my third college by the time I was at Ohio State in ROTC. I was trying really hard to get into the Air Force Academy. It was my dream
Mm.
school. I really wanted to get there. I had everything but the pull up. I just couldn't do a pull up. Was fortunate to receive a Falcon Foundation scholarship to go prep at a military college. And I went to New Mexico Military Institute. So I was in Army ROTC my freshman year in college. I went to basic training at Fort Knox and did the Army for a while.
Mhm.
And then I learned how to do a pull up took all the tests again, applied again, got another nomination, and I went to the Air Force Academy, my dream school. And I hated it. Oh, I didn't fit in. It didn't
Oh,
feel right. I was crushed. I was crushed. It was all I ever wanted. And it didn't feel right. And I did the worst thing you could do. I quit. I left.
wow.
Ended up back at home with mom and dad in Columbus, Ohio, with no plan, no plan. And thought, well, I'll go down to Ohio State admissions, see what I can do, and I'll probably just have to get a job until I can apply again for winter quarter because it was too late for what I thought was too late for fall quarter. Went into the ROTC building just to look around, and I went to Army ROTC, and I thought, well, I somehow the Air Force didn't fit. I've done the Army for a year. Guess I'll go back to Army ROTC. And they said, you don't match up here. You've had too much Army ROTC and not enough college. And so I wasn't aligned. And they said, come back in 2 years.
Huh.
So I went up to the second floor of that building, and that was Navy ROTC. And I thought, maybe I'll be in the Navy. And they were at lunch. The door was locked. So
Oh my gosh.
I went up to the third floor, and the Air Force, the professor of aerospace science was in that day. It was about a week before classes started. And he said, well, what are you doing next week? And I said, I think I'm getting a job. He said, come to class. Here's a brochure. So he helped get me in. He helped fast track my
Huh.
application to Ohio State,
Wow.
and the Air Force found me again. So I tried to leave the Air Force, and they found me again and brought me back home. So, and it was the best thing. Oh, I had so much fun and
Wow.
at Ohio State and in Air Force ROTC there, and got a pilot slot, got commissioned, joined the Air Force.
Rolling. Yeah. So then you joined the Air Force and ultimately it's 20 years there, but it's how does that unfold?
Yeah, I spent 20 years serving in the Air Force. I did 10 years on active duty and 10 years in the reserves. So after active duty service commitment, and I was a pilot that whole time, I left active duty, joined the reserves, and I got a job at the airlines. So I went and flew for AirTran Airways in Atlanta, Georgia, and also served the Air Force in the reserve. So I was living in Atlanta and commuting back to Dover, Delaware, flying 717 Boeing 717s at AirTran and C5s in the Air Force. And then in the Air Force, our unit converted to C-17s. And so I went to training for that. I took about a year, a little more than a year on active duty orders to go train for the C-17 and get all my qualifications there, and then came back to AirTran.
You must have seen some incredible things
It,
in
it was fantastic.
Mhm.
From the moment I got a pilot slot, I wanted to go see the world, and I thought I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I was doing pretty well in pilot training. My squadron commander said, well, I think we can get you an F-15. And I said, that's great, but now I want to fly cargo planes. And he said, no, you don't. I said, yes, I do. He said, all right, yeah, you do. That's your personality. So
So what does that mean? What would that personality mean?
I was too curious about what was out there. I wanted to see a little bit of everything. And from what I knew about the fighter community, those guys and girls are just really, really mission focused. They're sharp. They're into the intelligence aspect of aviation and threat and awareness.
Mhm.
I wanted to go deliver cargo all over the world.
You wanted to go places and see.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted the variety of missions. In the cargo world, you're taking humanitarian supplies after floods and earthquakes, you're evacuating soldiers and civilians out of hotspots around the world. You're taking diplomats and their classified equipment, their communications equipment, their vehicles. I flew the Secret Service a lot. I flew dignitaries from foreign countries. I flew a lot of special ops missions and went all over the world doing all kinds of things.
So the intensity of that, must have had some real peaks in the experience for you.
There were some highs and there were some lows. I was scared a lot.
Mhm.
I was proud a lot. I was excited a lot. a lot of really great people around the world. And there were times when I was doing a mission, and 3 days later, I'd see something in the global news on CNN, and I knew that I had helped there. I have taken fire trucks to places around the world where evacuations needed to happen, and the fire services team needed more equipment. I've taken engines to search and rescue missions when helicopters are looking for whatever needs to be found and they need maintenance. I can take the maintenance team, I can take the supplies.
I can imagine there aren't too many women to have the opportunity to do what you did there. Did you experience any gender bias? Did you experience any opportunities because you were female? How can you speak to that?
It's interesting when those things happen because usually, in my experience, I have served with some really great teams. And you just don't think about, gosh, I'm the only girl in the room, or there's not a lot of people that look like me doing what I'm doing. When you do fly with female crew members, there's something special there.
Mm,
It's fun, it's exciting to resonate with somebody with some unspoken camaraderie. For the most part, I'll say for the most part, I really had an even keeled career in that sense.
mm,
I wasn't unscathed. There were a couple times when things were frustrating.
mhm,
There was one time when our squadron was going to do an all female flight for an air refueling mission. And I was going to be the instructor on this mission. And they figured if they could get enough women together on this mission, that we'd make the newspaper. And they wanted the front page of the local paper for that mission. I dropped out. I went to the squadron commander and I said, if you kick the guys off the flight, that's discrimination just as much as it would be if you were to kick me off the flight because I'm a woman.
mhm,
And they said, well, but this is publicity. I said, it's discrimination. There's no way around it. So the guys get back on the flight because they had actually dropped some crew members off to facilitate this all women flight. It's not the first time women have all flown together before.
mhm,
It wasn't a history making flight in any way. There was nothing special about this mission. It was just going to be a media piece, it was going to be a dog pony show. And so I won't participate in an all woman anything for the sake of a headline.
and so what were the optics that they were getting at as far as it being an all-woman mission?
It was supposed to be look at us, aren't we great? Because we can look at these girls, pat on the head.
Mhm,
They can fly airplanes, they can load the airplane, they can engineer. Yeah. Well, I don't need to be looked at specially because I'm a woman.
mhm,
I want to be looked at specially because I fly a great airplane, because I'm a great crew member, because I'm a good leader, not because I'm a good female leader.
mhm. It sounds like it felt very demeaning.
It did. So that one got a little bit of attention. I got called into an office and talked to because I think they had set up the media stuff before everybody agreed to the flight. But
Yeah, before passing it by them. So then when was that when you were in active duty or when you were on reserve? And then when you were on the reserve, when you were in that sequence, you had more flexibility to sort of have a civilian life as well, is that
I did, yes, and that's why I got off of active duty. I loved serving, wanted
Mhm,
to continue serving. I was not finished being part of serving my country,
mhm,
and I that it would be great if I could do both. So I wanted to go back to school. I went and got my MBA. I spent a lot of time in school doing that while I was flying two airplanes and commuting between two states to do that and
mhm,
flying around the world. And I tell you what, you don't do that alone. When you set off for some ambitious goals, you have a team that helps you. And my husband, oh my gosh,
mm,
he carried a lot of workload during that time.
mhm. Because you had scheduling, right, and doing all the work. An MBA is not it's not a light load, and you were doing that in France? Or was it your doctoral you went to in France?
I did my doctorate in France.
Okay. Your MBA was in
I went to Georgia Tech. I was living in Atlanta. got an MBA at Georgia Tech.
And why did you go for your MBA?
I didn't want to be pigeonholed as just a pilot. I was an airline pilot, I was a military pilot. There's also a lot you do in the military that's not flying. All pilots in the military have additional duties. So you're also serving in a leadership position in the squadron or at the wing, doing training and evaluation, safety, executive and staff work, protocol. There's a lot of different ancillary jobs that are part of your career and service. You're going to schools to advance in promotion and serve the military in a number of ways. So that's when you hear about deployments and people are going on deployments and they're going to do a ground job. You have other things to do besides just being, there's no such thing as just being a pilot in the military.
Mhm,
So I had had these leadership positions and I wanted I didn't know if I wanted to start a business, write a book, have a side job, do some other things. And I found when I was talking to people or when I'd go to aviation conferences, when you say I'm a pilot, people put you in a box. They don't want to talk to you anymore about engineering or marketing or sales or communication or writing. I love writing and nobody wanted to talk to me about journalism or writing.
hmm,
And I thought, well, I've got to, how do I break out of this? I can either like forge a path forward or I can go to school and find out what all these people are talking about.
mhm,
And I was really intimidated to go get my MBA because
mhm,
it was an executive program and there were a lot of business owners and high level executives at companies. This is at Atlanta, Georgia, where there's headquarters of all these major companies and people are getting MBAs to go and run their companies or run their companies better.
mhm.
These are not 22-year-olds fresh out of college. So it was quite intimidating.
Right, in the executive program, you rub shoulders with very accomplished people that are sort of checking off a box in a sense to get the MBA.
Absolutely.
For you, it was a bit different, and I'm sure at times you felt like it was a bit of a fish out of water.
Absolutely. It was hard when a new class started and the finance professor would come in and say, so, when you talk to your CFO, and I thought, that, okay, don't think to yourself, I'm just a pilot. I'm just a pilot. Think to yourself, I've read the book, I can do the material, and I have a class of 50 people who are experts that I can talk to and be in groups with and write papers with and learn from. And I grew that way.
Mhm. So it's interesting when I'm thinking about what you're saying, and when in pilot training, I feel like the saying "fake it till you make it" just doesn't fly. It just you can't, it just shows up.
Yeah, that's not very safe for very long.
But I wonder if when you started to venture in the business world and even in that specific setting when you were sort of doubting your own abilities, whether it was a little bit more you telling yourself, "Actually, I really can do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I wonder if, fake it till you make it had a little more relevance once you got out of, that very mission-oriented, intense discipline of pilot aviation and, working in the Air Force."
I think when people say fake it till you make it, and I've definitely done my fair share of that, people are talking about your attitude, not your skill set. So you've got to go get the skills. You can fake the confidence. It doesn't feel good, but you can lean on people and ask questions and learn and stand up tall and dress the part and do some research. You can grow into the confidence, but you can't grow into the technical ability of a job or a school program or a course load if you don't work your butt off to do it.
Mhm. So what did you do between your MBA and, I guess, your doctoral program, which I gather there was quite a few years in that interim?
Yeah. So I was 36 when I started my MBA, and I was 42 when I started my doctoral program. When I finished Georgia Tech, I was actually headhunted by a company to work with amphibious vehicles. These are boats that have been retrofitted with wheels. So they are like buses that do tours through town and then they drive into the water and they boat around for a little bit.
Mhm.
They were actually the World War II amphibious vehicles. You know how you see them in the movies? They come out of the back of the ship and they drive the Marines onto the land and they resupply other ships.
We see those in Boston. They're the duck boats, they call them.
Yep. So that company does some great entertainment, tourism. They did some manufacturing for a while, and that's a great entertainment company. They recruited me to be a director of operations for this amphibious vehicle fleet.
Hmm.
Now, who's got experience doing that? Fake it till you make it. You're like, I can talk about amphibs. I'm a pilot. I got a business degree.
Sure.
I can do this. And I was so fortunate that they had some really excellent technicians at that company. Learned a lot about boats, a lot about vehicles, and a lot about entertainment and tourism. That was the business they were in.
Mhm.
So much fun, such a great job. A lot of challenges there too, because you're working behind the scenes with machinery that has to be safe, roadworthy, inspected, refurbished. I learned more about maintenance in that job than I did as a pilot operating machine.
Hmm.
So I did that for a couple years. I made the choice to get out of aviation, knowing that I might not ever be able to get back. Because when you leave a pilot job, you might not get the opportunity to come back. It's very competitive.
Hmm.
They want you to be current. They want you to have recency of experience. They want you to have qualifications in that type of aircraft. And so I talked about it with my husband for a long time. If I leave my airline job, I might never get back into flying at the airlines.
Hmm.
And that scared the heck out of me.
Mhm.
That's how I knew it was the right decision. I was going to take this challenge and know that I'm trusting the universe to lead me forward without having any regrets about where I would go after that.
Mhm.
So I worked at this duckboat company for a number of reasons. That job was changing and the company was changing, and I was getting itchy to get back into aviation. And so I did the circuits again. I had the suit and the resume, and I'm still in the Air Force Reserves at this time. So by that time, I was at a staff job. So I wasn't flying there either. So I was out of aviation completely.
Mhm.
But now I've got this whole resume of business, and I ended up being vice president of that company and a whole portfolio of experiences in the business world.
Hmm.
Now the pilot world is telling me, well, you're a business person. You don't have any recency of experience. You're not flying anything currently. You left aviation. Nobody likes it when you walk away from their pride and joy.
Mhm.
So I was having a hard time getting a job back in aviation.
Hmm.
Ended up working for a company where I could be both a manager and a pilot. They were hiring pilot managers. And so I did that for about 6.5 years, flying heavy cargo aircraft
Mhm.
and also working in the management department. So I did training, I did some work with safety, I did some work with operations. I created a system, airport information guides,
Hmm.
so that when the pilots flew into over 200 airports around the world, they'd have all the directives for not just where to park and how to taxi, but what the local rules and regulations were for these stations,
Mhm.
who to contact, how to operate not just safely but efficiently.
And did you see that as a stepping stone?
I did. I thought that that was a place where I could put all of this experience together.
Mhm.
And I see that that's how you don't understand your purpose fully until you can look back on it and see that for that job, I needed some business skills and I needed some accident investigation work and I needed a whole lot of pilot knowledge and pilot experience.
Mhm.
And I got curious about these people who could do multiple jobs and take companies forward into the future through chaos and through change. Nobody likes change. Some people are really good at it. Who are these people that are really good at it? And how do they convince others to be so? And that this was nagging at me.
Mhm.
I finally read a magazine article in Fast Company that said, it talked about Generation Flux. We're now past 2008's financial crisis, and all the millennials are working in the gig economy now. People have multiple jobs. People are creating their own jobs. People are being solopreneurs and getting venture capital funding for that and doing things that no longer belong on business card titles. They're doing jobs that are expansive, purposeful, solve problems, and take things into the future.
Hmm.
I knew there was something to this change in the way that we work. This evolution of working is happening right in front of us. There was very little discussion on this, and I knew there was something there. I knew that that was how I worked, and I struggled to explain to people how my career evolution happened.
Hmm.
I would get two kinds of responses to my career. The first one was, why?
Hmm.
Why did you go back to school? Why did you leave aviation? Why did you get back into aviation? And other whys. Interested, but it doesn't make sense. You can tell it makes them uncomfortable. Other people look at me and say, yeah,
Hmm.
oh, I had an experience. Or what are you going to do after that? Or would you ever consider doing this?
Hmm.
And so you can hear the difference, just the tone of voice in why versus wow.
So in sort of that moment, you can get a sense of whether this isn't a person that really has no idea why you would have a nonlinear trajectory, and then the other set of people that are like, "Oh, I get it," right? Like,
Yeah.
you did the thing, and then there was another opportunity, or you made another opportunity and was obvious to you, but it didn't necessarily fit into some of the boxes that may have been set out.
So I was desperate to talk about these non-box fitting people. And I knew there was something there. I knew there was a way to categorize it or describe the philosophy behind it. And I didn't have the words.
Hmm.
So I started looking at doctoral programs so that I could do some scientific research on this and prove it. Just needed to explain to myself why this happened. And so it's funny, when I was talking to people about how do you write a thesis and what does it mean to do a dissertation, somebody told me every thesis is a search for the self. And I said, yes, that's it. I have to do this. I have to go get my doctorate because I'm searching for myself. And until I can write it and prove it and pass it, I won't be satisfied.
Mhm. And you were trying to prove that it was a thing, right? That it wasn't, sort of an odd.
Exists. There's a category of people who exist, who live to do multiple jobs. Some people are very happy to say, I want to be pick your favorite thing, a fireman, an engineer, an accountant.
Mhm.
And they train for that or they go to school for that and they have this very lovely career path right up the ladder.
Mhm.
I don't like ladders. If you've done the bottom rung, it looks just like the middle rung. The view's a little bit higher. It looks like the top rung. The view's a little bit higher. I need, as Sheryl Sandberg put it, I need the jungle gym. I want to climb around and down and get off and leave and come back and up and onto something different.
Mhm.
And that makes me grow. That makes me create. And I think people who see the world that way are there's something special there that businesses are going to be able to grow from.
Mhm. That nimble sense of seeing opportunity in, many different circumstances, and sort of that I think I've heard you refer to the serial specialist as a way of describing that.
Yeah, I was talking to Miles Anthony Smith, we found each other online at some point. He was also researching generation flux for his work. And so we talked for a long time about what does it mean to be a serial specialist?
Mhm.
It's people who are interested, they're polymathic, which means you're good at a lot of things in depth.
Mhm.
Not just that you can play the field. I thought that's what my MBA was. I went to a great program at Georgia Tech, but we did one of every subject, and they were all interesting, but they were all topical. If you want to be an accountant, getting your MBA is not going to make you an accountant. It's going to make you well versed in a lot of subjects,
Mhm.
but not in great depth.
Mhm.
So that's up to your company and your personal experience to train you in depth into your career field. But an MBA is a great broad degree. I needed to go really deep into what happens if you were to take all those subjects of your MBA and study them in depth.
Let's dig deep into the flux agent idea and your first book that was the fruit of that labor.
Yeah, I went round and round with my dissertation team when I was getting my doctorate about what to call these people.
Mm,
I'm really glad that I went to school in Europe because now the program was in English. It's really interesting when things are spoken in English as a second language or English as the foreign language. And the reason the program wasn't in English is because if you want to be widely published and widely read in the world, you will write in English. It seems to be the language of academics. And so I was really glad my program was in English because my French wasn't strong enough to support academic work. When I was talking to people whose first language wasn't English about generation flux, when they hear generation, they think age group. And they'd say, well, but there's older people doing this too. And I mean generation as a coterie of people, as a group, as a mindset, as a subset. And I didn't want to have to go into an explanation of generation. That's not what I'm studying here.
mhm,
If we're going to get hung up on vocabulary, then that's the wrong word. So what do I call these people? So we went around and around, and a friend of mine from Rwanda actually said, "Well, they're agents of change, right?"
mm,
I said, "That's it. They're agents." And so I tried a number of naming conventions, and that one stuck. So they are Generation Flux. Flux is nice because that's actually a physics term talking about fluidity, flow, change. And then there's some great research out there about being in the zone, being in flow, being lost in your thoughts to the point where time passes and you're not aware of it because you're working so hard and in love with the subject at hand. And that's it exactly. So
mhm,
flux stayed, generation went, and agents appeared. So flux agents. And that actually helped me to do deeper research because now I'm talking about a certain type of people.
mhm,
Agents are people who create change, they adapt well. And just because you adapt well doesn't mean you like it. You don't have to like that change is happening. You just have to be good at overcoming it,
mm,
successful in facing it. And and so the generation flux stayed. And so through a lot of research, I found that flux agents share uh, five characteristics. I thought they'd share six, but they only share five. And the first three are character traits: boundaryless career attitudes, meaning you can't be held into a box either physically or emotionally. So if you're going to be at a job where there's no promotion, no chance for change, no chance for change of attitude at the company as time passes, their thoughts don't change. That's how you get like the good old boys club, or that's the way we've always done it. People who don't sit well in that space are boundaryless. They cannot be bounded. They are willing to move somewhere else if necessary. They are willing to change their job title if necessary. They're willing to do something different as change happens, they can adapt. So they're boundaryless. They're intrinsically motivated. They don't have to be necessarily pepped up to do their job. They don't have to be carrot out in front or stick behind. They are eager to do the work because it's exciting, it's important to them, they see value in it, it fulfills something, serves a purpose. They're intrinsically motivated, it's within them.
mhm,
And then they have a growth mindset. So Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford did a lot of research into fixed mindsets and growth mindsets. And she's got a great website, excellent book. Growth mindset is if I give you a challenge and you don't do well, are you willing to do it again? Are you willing to try something harder? Do you think that failure is a part of the process of getting wiser and better and stronger? And so people with a growth mindset are brave because they accept, they're not afraid to fail, maybe a little, but they accept that failure is a part of this process of becoming who you want to become.
Mhm.
So boundaryless, intrinsic motivation, and growth mindset. And then there's two aptitudes of openness to new experience and extroversion that round out this character. So the flux agents are open to try new things. They're not stuck in a place where they have to do it the way it's always been done.
Mhm.
They want to explore a little bit. They want to have an environment of fresh ideas. It helps to have a breeze blowing through. So open to new experiences. And then extroverted, you talk to a lot of people, you are involved in the world, you get energy from being around fast paced things, groups of people, and the energy out there.
Mhm.
So when you smash all that together, this is what a flux agent is. And so it helps me to talk to people about why I am the way I am, why there's people who are out there that want challenges, that aren't afraid of change, that see evolution as part of the process of us all getting stronger and better.
And are you imagining or you can think of that as a causation or association, or what relationship between those 5 factors and this sort of mindset of being a flux agent is determinant, and which is the chicken or the egg?
That's an excellent question. When I interviewed people around the world for this, we interviewed people in 34 countries. Everybody who identified as a flux agent, like the first question is, here's what a flux agent is. Do you identify as this? Yes or no?
Mhm.
And the people who do identify with this, the people who say, yeah, tell me more,
Mhm.
those people all scored high in all 5 of those traits, some a little bit more here and there. And it's not really important how high you score in each of them, just that for better or worse, you're getting high scores in these areas.
Mhm.
The people who said, no, I don't understand this, it confuses me, it scares me, I disagree, those people all scored low in flux traits. And so we talked to people about it a little bit more. And as they would identify more as a flux agent, they would score higher in those areas. So we found that it's self determinant. If you say you're a flux agent, you are. So this is a little bit also of fake it till you make it.
Mm.
This is something that resonates with you. If you think that it's interesting, if this is the type of person that you want to be, you're going to score higher and higher in each of these categories: boundaryless, intrinsic motivation, growth mindset, extroversion, and openness to new experiences.
Hmm.
After we talk about it for a while, you say, well, I'm pretty open to new experiences. I've got a growth mindset. You're probably going to turn around and say, you know what? I am a flux agent.
Hmm.
Those characteristics, never mind, they really don't fit with me.
Mhm.
I'm not a flux agent.
Mhm.
So if you say you are, you are. If I explain these traits to you and they're not you, you're probably not going to be. One is not good and bad, they're just different.
Mhm.
The world needs flux agents, the world needs not flux agents. I really need my doctor to be really good at being a doctor. Maybe they're a flux agent too, but I want the best doctor out there. I want the best car mechanic out there. I want the best shoe salesman out there. So we need some people who aren't flux agents, who kind of further the field deeply in their area.
Mhm.
But I also need people to be able to cross boundaries and tie it together and say, you know what, you know what we can do with shoe salesmen and car mechanics and medical doctors, and then they'll solve some great, I mean, maybe they'll solve COVID. Maybe there's some solution there too. We need to be out walking more for our physical health, and the car is important, and maybe there's some solution there.
Some more cross-pollination that if we stay in our own lane, we can't access that.
Right. You need people that are really in their lane.
Right. To further it. I think that the breakdown of and this idea of the flux agent is fascinating. And I thought a bit about how if one feels sort of a bit awkward or unsettled and, they may identify as a flux agent, but by breaking down the attributes, one could say, well, yes, growth mindset. Yes, I'm open to new experiences, but maybe one of those you're not realizing to their potential. And maybe that's the reason, maybe that bolstering that if we imagine the 5 attributes as being a spectrum, and if I say to myself, for instance, the extroversion part is the one that I feel a little uncomfortable with, but you know what? That's actually a key element, and maybe by identifying of those 5 areas of growth within that, we can sort of help be our, most expansive self if we do identify as a flux agent. And I think the breaking down of the mindset and the characteristics is really fascinating and helpful. I think it's actually extremely helpful to understand and to sort of clarify that not only that being a flux agent is a thing, not an aberration, but actually a thing and a contribution to the world. But I do have some other questions that I just wanted to throw your way. So if, for instance, you're in one of those careers that by its structure is linear, so we'll consider being a doctor, being a physician. What does one do if they start to feel a little fluxy and really you're in a box and you're in a career that really doesn't, just like you said, you don't want your doctor to sort of come up with a whole lot of new ideas or go off and do an entirely different thing. But as from an individual basis, I imagine that that can be difficult. And so how does one or does one transfer in their life, in their arc of their life from maybe periods that are more aligned with a linear life and other periods where they can be expansive? Or do you imagine this as sort of a life script that you're kind of defined by this flux agency or kind of not?
The beauty of it is that it's not a set attribute in you. You can go in and out of being flux. Your flux, everybody's a little flux. It's like a scale. So are you flux one or are you flux 1 million?
Mhm,
Maybe most of the time you sit at 100. Maybe you sit at flux 20 for a while, but there's periods in your life where you are involved in a lot of different things. You're stretching, you're solving, there's a lot of change. Maybe you're flux 90 for a while. There's some people, there's like the Elon Musks of the world that are flux 100 all the time. Richard Branson, always flux. There's some people that aren't very flux, and that's great. But people should feel free to move up and down the flux scale. And that was always something I thought I would do for my next piece of research on this, is take it to a scaled concept and
mhm,
let people identify more closely with
mm,
what does it mean to be 5 or what does it mean to be 100 on the flux scale. I had some answers in my research from different people of different walks of life that said I was very flux when I was in the Marine Corps. I deployed a lot. I had a lot of different jobs. I moved around a lot. I was qualified in these different weapons systems. I was very flux. And when I got out of the Marines, I found the city I wanted to live in. I settled down. I had a family. I like that my life doesn't change a lot now. I like that I've driven the same car for 10 years. I like that my kids have gone to the same school the whole time. I am not flux and I like it. Great.
mhm,
I've had other people say, I just sent my kids off to school. I was a stay at home mom. Now I'm involved in all of these things. I am so much more flux now than I ever thought I could be. Great. So people are finding their flux and their non flux at different points in their life. It's not age dependent. We found that flux agency was true for individuals no matter their age, and people took my survey that were age 18 through age 81. I had at least one person of every age in that bracket, 18 to 81. And the responses were not skewed towards either gender, any age group. And I looked at age in a lot of different groups. I did them in 10-year blocks, and then I did them in true generations. The millennials, the Gen Zs weren't old enough at the time, 5 or 7 years ago when I did this research. The millennials, the Gen Xers, the baby boomers, and the silent generation. People are the same amount of flux across spectrums, and internationally too. Americans are not more flux than Belgians.
mhm. I was thinking quite a bit also about the external factors of being a flux agent. And you did your research, and the article by Robert Seffi in Fast Company was back in 2012, and the world has changed quite a bit since then. I wonder how, or does this affect your thinking of flux agency? And seems evident to me that we are not as in control of the course of our life as we were 12 months ago, 9 months ago. So yeah, the external factors and how that's a reality. That context in which we live is undeniable and
Mhm.
could create this misfit situation, I suppose, which probably has all sorts of outcomes that aren't healthy.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately about how Flux Agency was born out of this post financial crisis era.
Mhm,
In 2012, we were talking about the gig economy because people were forced into having multiple jobs, part time jobs, and jobs in fields they weren't trained in or didn't initially have an interest in because they had to have a job. They're trying to get out of this financial crisis. The millennials were going to college and graduating with no jobs out there. So then they started doing different things or things that they thought were below their status or in a different state or creating a company. We had a boom in entrepreneurship, not because people were dying to be entrepreneurs, but because they had to be to survive. So
mhm,
the way the world was changing, chaotic, forced us into a different type of work, which drew out this ability to define a character type that was dormant if it existed previously, and emergent if didn't exist at all previously. So now that we're in a different type of global crisis, same issue, right? Global crisis, just the subject matter is different. It's now a health scare. And I can't, for a period of time, we all couldn't leave our houses. And then we could leave our houses, but only to do certain things. And now we have to be protected in safety gear and physically distant from people in order to be safe. So the way we work and solve problems will change a year from now. I think right now we're still deep in the middle of the pit. We don't know what we're going to do with it. We've reached crisis point for I'm not a part of a community. I can't go to work. I lost my job. My job is changing. The airlines are getting decimated right now. But a year from now, how will people adapt from that? And I think there will be this certain group of people that we will be able to look at and say, this is the way they're working now. No, that's not what they intended to do. I intended to be an airline pilot. I'm recently retired.
mhm,
I'm taking the best advantage of a bad situation personally because I'm retired from the airlines now because I was offered an early out package. My company needed pilots to leave because eventually they won't be able to afford to pay us all. So I jumped on the lifeboat. Now I'm adapting to my new situation. Personally, I'm pretty happy about my situation at the moment, but this isn't what I expected my career to look like
mhm.
4 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago. So, how will we all adapt to our livelihood situations a year from now? I'm starting to look at this aspect of community and adaptation for this next phase.
Mhm.
It was Flux Agents post 2008 financial crisis. What agents will it be post COVID pandemic?
And you have a hunch it has a community.
I'm 100% sure it has a community solution to it because the biggest problem right now is isolation.
Mhm,
We're not isolating, so we're not solving the problem. We are isolated, so we can't educate the kids, go to work, be a part of the organizations we were at before. They say these terrible things are on the rise: domestic violence and child abuse and malnourishment of children because they were getting their meals at school. And
mhm,
I don't want to talk about all the bad stuff, but also work. Places have had to close, restaurants are down. We're not going out to entertainment venues where there's a lot of places in this world that depend on 100,000 people being in an event to grow an industry of entertainment. That's
mhm.
we spend a lot of money on as communities. So when we can't all be together to do those things, what happens to the way we live our lives and earn our money? and educate our kids and solve our health issues.
You have something to the effect of chaos is wonderful, and I believe the point is that it enables us to shake things up and see opportunity in that. This is a period of time where it's a little more uncomfortable for me personally to embrace this sort of idea of chaos being an enabler and being something wonderful and beautiful. But I was hoping you could speak to that a little bit.
Chaos is beautiful because it forces the change. The chaos itself is not beautiful.
Mm,
We have all gone through something tragic in our lives this past year. I think everybody, and it's different for everyone. I recognize that some people are just going to be unable to recover the from what 2020 has given them. Other people are just going to make small adaptations, but community is how we're dealing with it, and community is how we'll come out of it. And so we will be forced into some sort of change. I think over the next several years, we're going to put more emphasis on supply chains, on community involvement, on healthcare, on political issues, on environmental issues, because we saw what happened when everybody quit driving for a while. Those things won't go unnoticed. And there are people that are in school now and their lives are changing because they're in formative years. There are researchers that have had to switch what they're doing because now suddenly these other issues are more important in healthcare.
mhm,
There are people that deal with elderly or ill people that are going to have to change the way they do that. So when you and I are elderly, disabled, ill, years from now, hopefully, medicine will be different when we're in our 80s and 90s
mhm,
because it's being changed right now.
mhm,
I think that's the beauty that will come out of all of this is that our children will have a different world. We're forced to make this shift. Now, what we do with it from here, that's the next question.
mhm. That's TBD.
Yeah, well, it's raining on us right now. So the good news is a lot of dirt's going to wash away. The bad news is it's flooding for a while, but we have different problems now.
Mhm,
We're going to look at things differently. We're going to use a collective conscious to be able to battle those problems.
mhm. You're involved in a nonprofit called the Abington Foundation. How does your work there could you describe that a bit? And then also, how has that changed in this current situation?
Abingdon Foundation is a nonprofit formed to help increase the amount of girls and women in the STEAM fields. STEAM, not STEM, we've evolved science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And I think that's very flux because the arts are a very important component of the STEM fields. Arts help people do better design, to think across boundaries, to shape and form the way we interact with our world. And if that's not important in science, technology, engineering, and math, I don't know what is. So the girls and women of the future that are STEAM oriented, exposed to STEAM fields, have a chance to understand what it is that STEAM is, how that can be something great and challenging and fun and opportunistic in their lives is very important. So at Abingdon Foundation, we set out to help expose girls and women to the STEAM fields.
Mhm,
Abingdon Mullen, who is the CEO of the Abingdon Co., she's a CEO of a watch company for adventurous women. This is separate. This is our arm of exposing people to the STEAM fields. And so we give scholarships to industry conferences. We have some educational tools and a lot of communication effort and outreach programs with girls who have never met a race car driver or a pilot or an astronaut or an engineer or a university professor and let them know that you can do this when you grow up. these are important people. There are women in these fields. We don't see a lot of them sometimes, but there's important people doing important work, and you're probably going to be one of them.
Mm,
If you could see girls and young people at the start of their career, and middle-aged women who are making a career change, and people who have recently refound or found their interest in scuba diving or aviation or something at a more advanced age, I think your world changes. And
mm,
that is a really, really important part of enabling people to make these changes that happen when we're all dealing with a global pandemic. There are online aviation programs that might help supplement your schoolwork or make your schoolwork more interesting because you know that it actually applies to science or aviation or race car driving or scuba diving.
One of the things that I love about the mission of the Abington Foundation is that it's really keyed into the access issue to some of these STEAM fields from the perspective of women. And it seems like it's such a key contributor to why there are not and could be more young girls and then women who are in these fields. And it's a very optimistic and promising initiative. So I really interested in how the foundation will continue to develop and enable girls, women to be what they're going to become. It's really exciting, really.
Yeah, thanks. It's important work to be able to share experiences of women in these fields with others.
If you can't see it as a young child especially, how could you imagine yourself being it, right?
Right.
That's asking a lot.
Yeah.
Which is also a good segue to what I think is your sort of most current project besides the writing that it sounds like we can also look forward to. But the Boundaryless Hub, which is a community that you started before COVID, but it sounds like it has a new life now.
I am really great at community. I have more contacts with people that are diverse and interesting than I ever thought I would. Just so blessed to be able to talk to people when I go to conferences and to have a brave voice. I don't always know what to say, but one of my special skills is I can walk up to anybody and introduce myself. And I learned that from my dad. He taught me to always go and introduce yourself and just ask them questions about themselves. And my dad's such a great communicator. And so just watching him do business all those years, he is in sales and he's really, really great with people. And I've always wanted to be really great with people. I can't qualify whether I am or not. I'm always a little bit nervous to talk to new people, but I'm brave enough to do so. And so I get a lot of invitations for coffee dates, or I'll create a bunch of coffee dates with people. And I was having coffee with a friend of mine once, and we were kind of new friends. We had just met. We were set up by somebody else who said, "You ought to meet this lady." And so I said, "Okay." So we were having lunch, and so a friend of hers walked in and she stood up from the table and said, Bethany, you have to meet so and so. And introduced me to her friend and said, "This is Bethany. She's my mentor." And I was floored. I was a little bit disappointed because I thought we were friends. And I thought by her introducing me as her mentor, that she didn't like me on the level of being friends. And it took me a while to figure out that people keep introducing me as their mentor. And we're just having coffee and I get more from them than they probably could ever get out of me because like I said, I'm a brave communicator, but I don't know if I'm a good one. The more I realized this, the more I realized that I do a lot of outreach with people. I talk to young people a lot about aviation or business or jobs, or I seem to be the one that gets the phone call that says, "Would you tell my daughter about your experience in business school? Have you ever been to Japan? Would you tell my daughter about traveling around the world and how to do it safely?" Or always asked by people to talk to their daughters.
That's a compliment.
Yeah, it is now. I figured that out.
Yeah.
I didn't get it at first, but the universe has to hit you over the head the right amount of times for you to realize, this is what I am. I'm a mentor, And for a while, it was really hard for me to swallow that label because it's hard to say I'm a mentor, but I am. And I get as much out of it as I think that I give. I try to give a lot, but I always seem like I'm getting more out of it myself than I'm getting new ideas, getting confidence from young people. I'm getting experience stories from people that are older than me.
Hmm.
I don't think mentorship's about an age. I think you can mentor up and mentor down and mentor sideways. And just because somebody's much older than you doesn't mean they're in your field or has your experiences or has read the books you've read. So there's a lot you can get out of talking to people. And so I started my boundaryless website. It's boundaryless.xyz, and realized that I like talking to people.
Hmm.
Let's talk about your career, because people will call me out of the blue. They find me on LinkedIn and they message me and say, "Can we talk about your career? Can we talk about my career? What's it like to be a pilot?" And I talk to almost everybody.
Hmm.
If in fact I was going to start a business doing this, and then I realized that didn't feel right. It would demean the value of the connection for me to start this business. So it's not in the right form to do that. So,
To monetize it.
right. Yeah. I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it because it lights me up.
Hmm.
Not everybody, you're not always a good match for other people, especially when you cold call somebody. And that's fine, because that's a great lesson too. You should learn to figure out who your people are and where you're going to get energy and who's got a bad idea. And you should go find all that.
How would you mentor a young Bethany? Younger.
I wish the younger me would have been more attentive to some certain subjects. I wish I had studied foreign languages better.
Mm,
I wish I had journaled or written the stories about all the places I've been in the world.
mm,
I never took notes, and a lot of the memories go away very quickly. Or my husband will be talking about, remember that time we were in Bulgaria? And yes, and I have to place it. And was that for a birthday trip or was that one of our military trips? And I have to place it. So
so those blank journals.
yeah, I wish I had written down more, even just jotted notes or kept
Yeah.
calendars, kept physical calendars. I wish I had read more books, although I do read a lot.
Mhm.
I think reading's like ice cream. There's no such thing as too much.
Right? Just keep soaking it in and learning different perspectives. Do you have anything that you're reading now that you'd like to throw out there and recommend?
I just got a book on Lucretia Borgia for my birthday. That was my birthday request because I'm looking at powerful women, particularly of the Renaissance period right now. I
Huh.
don't know why. That's just a subject that has entered my search engine. And we watched the Borgia series on Netflix. And so it's hard to separate truth from reality sometimes when something's based on an historical period. So
It makes you more curious, doesn't it?
yeah, very curious. But I'm all related to that. I'm also reading Silk Roads: A New History of the World,
Oh,
and it is this big, huge, fat, thick book that I saw in an airport, and I just had to have it. And it's just this wonderful history of not just the Silk Roads, but from the Greek 600 BC in Athens all the way up through modern day international conflict zones in
hmm.
Iraq, Kyrgyzstan, the other parts of the Middle East, and Europe and America, and how they're all related. The gold trade, the silver trade, the slave trade, the exchange of religious ideas.
Hmm.
It's got everything in there. Excellent, excellent book. So I happen to be in the book at the Renaissance phase there. So that all had kind of tied together.
It all ties together in your own way, right? I don't wanna take too much more of your time, but I do wonder, someone who is so active as you in the mind, how do you keep yourself healthy? Do you have patterns, routines?
I get up early. I'm an early riser, but that's just my nature. People like to talk about they ask famous people, what's your morning routine? And all the famous people get up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I think it depends on you. You got to find your zone. So I have found the times of day when I know my circadian rhythm is really high. I work in those. So I happen to get up early and I'm studying languages. And so it's the first thing I do in the morning is I write in my journal, I read my Bible readings and do my meditations. And I've started doing them in all four languages, five languages, so that I know that I'm getting that piece of it in early when my brain is on fire. Coffee,
Hmm.
meditation, journal, language. And I work out every day. That's not, I don't do an intense workout every day, but I do like to run. I do yoga. There's an elliptical machine at our gym. I stretch a lot. I used to walk a lot when I lived in San Francisco. Now that I'm in Dallas, I'm not walking as much, but I'm at the gym more. So
Hmm.
if I don't get a certain amount of cardio in, my brain won't reset. It's kind of, I have to shake up my body like that to
Hmm.
kind of work it all out. So
Expunge a bit.
yes, yeah, I need movement. I'm a very moving person. We got a standing desk a couple months ago, so I like being up and down. And I'm sitting in a chair right now, but usually the desk is high and I'm standing and lots of movement.
It doesn't surprise me, right? And I'm sure that understanding flux agents more, I bet there is a spectrum where, or maybe a crossover between, I don't want to say attention because I don't think it's a factor of attention, but just needing to move the body could also be a reflection of needing to move the mind, right? And I think there's probably a connection there that
Yeah,
isn't surprising.
the body movement kind of gets me out of my head. It makes things calm down. And when people have interesting ways of allowing that flow of creativity to come, just like the natural train of thought that goes to weird places. And that for me is when I'm running.
It's great. Bethany, thank you so much. This has been such a rewarding and fun conversation. I'd love for you to let us know how we can find you in all the different ways.
Yeah, everything is on I've got a website that's my name, BethanyJJMiller.com. Two J's in the middle. I have two middle names. And you can get to Flux Agents through BethanyJJMiller.com. You can get to Boundaryless, and you can see some of my other writing and all my social and my LinkedIn. And if you ping me for a chat on LinkedIn, I will probably ping you back.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sylvia.
Thank you for listening to the When Women Fly podcast. My hope is that you leave this conversation with a sense of curiosity and empowerment to hold on to what is important and let go to what weighs you down. Stare fear in the face. If you like this episode of the When Women Fly podcast, be sure to share and subscribe and let us know what you think. We love feedback. Be brave, be bold, and fly. See you next time.